So I'm so interested in talking about the idea of negotiation when it comes to parenting, because as parents, we come from, there's like a long tradition in the United States anyway, of like, you do as I say because I say it, and that's the way it is. Yet things are really changing now. Things are, parents are realizing like that's actually can be ineffective, that it leads to a lot of maybe sneaking and lying, all
Hmm.
kinds of like
Yes.
unpleasant things that we don't want, right? um, but I imagine that when I talk about the idea of negotiation when it comes to the idea of parenting, it still can bring up some prickly feelings with a lot of listeners. Is this something that, like, that you had to think about in your own parenting, kind of bringing this work that you do with negotiation? Did you have to like kind of wrestle with this idea of a prickliness around it when it comes to parenting?
That's a great question. My kids are a bit older, and I wish I would have done that work when they were younger, because I was pretty much like you were saying earlier. I was like, do this, do that, I'm the parent, and that's it. However, and when we say negotiating as parenting, it's not like negotiating time to go to bed. It's like, all right, so they have a chance to win, I have a chance to win. No, it's more like we are teaching our kids the best way we feel it's the best way for them. But sometimes we use the past that fuels emotions, right? We're impatient, or, for example, my mom will give ice cream to my kids when they were young just before dinner. I'm like, no, not before dinner. But that doesn't really matter at the end of the day, right? But it was how I was brought up. No, you cannot have your dessert before you finish your food. So I was teaching my kids the way I was brought up. And there's a lot of ego in that perspective. Ego, it's our instinctual reactive structure. So every time we snap, every time we something is going very fast as a parent, it's because ego is taking over. And mindfulness and ego are pretty much opposed from a reaction or timing to react perspective. Most of parents will just react on the fly, right? Something happens, like, okay, do this, or don't do that, or why are you doing this? So this is the challenge with parenting. And I hope when I was a younger dad, I could have brought mindfulness to my parenting, because I'm sure it would have changed the way I brought up my kids.
So you're basically describing ego as that sort of autopilot place
Mm-hmm.
that we get into where we're not thinking,
Yeah.
where, it's that sense of a protective self, right? Keeping it, protecting us, keeping us from threat. And that's that autopilot reactive place. And yes, I mean, as we talk about a lot on here, like mindfulness is like this sort of like key for helping us step away from that. How did you work in teaching people how to negotiate? How did you what well what are some of the ways that why are we bad at it? You talk about how you have a chapter that I love, title that I love, called Everybody Sucks at Negotiation.
Yes.
So can you explain to us like why we're so bad at this?
Yeah. First of all, I was arguing with my editor to use that word or not, but the purpose of that title was to generate a reaction.
Mhm.
So from the outside looking in, negotiation seems to be very easy, right? It's the same as when we observe somebody else on the street. Oh, we'll never do this or we'll do that. Very easy when we're not involved. But you can be really prepared. You can be skilled. And all of a sudden, the negotiation doesn't go as planned. And now we're not feeling in control. And now we're emotional. We're afraid to lose a deal. We don't know what to do next. Somebody's threatening us. So negotiation, it's really difficult. And most people think they are better than they are in reality, because they don't have an appreciation about when we negotiate with somebody, we're emotional.
Mm.
And if we are emotional and the other person is emotional, that's two people getting emotional together. even if we try to plan and forecast and rationalize, it's not enough. And if we're not able to control our emotion as a negotiator, we have a hard time to think, right? Because when we are emotional, we're making bad decisions. If you think about people getting through divorce, it's nasty, and people do things just to hurt the other person. It's not rational. And parenting, for me, it's exactly the same thing. It's all about emotions, right? We're triggered. Our kids are doing something, we're triggered because we were triggered when we were young, right? So the way we are as a parent, it's a good testimony of how it was in our family, in our household, up to 3 years old. So we're emotional. We're emotional, period. When we negotiate, our survival instinct kicks in. We just want to be right. We want to persuade. We want to be the person who has the right point of view. And I believe when we are parenting our kids, we're coming from a similar angle. We want to be right. We want to do, because we're the parent. But sometimes it's emotion talking. It's not the true person.
You said, I want to pick up on something you said, up to 3 years old. Why do you say up to 3 years old exactly?
Because ego is developed before 3 years of age, right? So how we were with mom, how we were with dad, how was it? Did we have any siblings? Did we have to fight to be seen, to be heard? That structure of ego, according to psychologists, it's done almost complete by the age of 3. There's some exception, obviously, but everything before that is building up, designing the personality of who we are today. It's almost like we wear a mask on our face, on our heart, and that mask is becoming part of us. And the challenge with that is ego. If you understand a bit of science, Hunter, ego is coming from the deepest, oldest part of the brain called reptilian brain. That part of the brain never evolved. So it's quick, reacting because it's all about survival. When we're focusing on mindfulness, it's our frontal lobe that it's acting, and it's a slow structure, looking at events, not judging, not going in the past. And that's why mediation works so well in negotiation, because if you have a good mediator, they say, I hear you, but now let's find a way to close that gap together. That's what mindfulness
time.
Yeah, times, and you are angry, that's okay.
Acknowledgement.
But what else is there other than, and in negotiation, we never do that, right? We don't have the time. The other side is asking unrealistic demand. We just got triggered. People sometimes want to create a win-win that badly that they are willing to give everything away. And parenting is no different. I saw parents that they give everything the kids is asking for, or very tough parents that are never giving a chance to the kid. Either way, it's a little bit extreme, and it's all about, managing emotion or being managed by emotion.
So when we're in this reactive place, the emotions are running the show. What should be the goal of our negotiation then? If we know that we suck at it, we know we're doing it from, the amygdala, the reactive brain, the nervous system, emotional, safety system, then and we want to shift towards a slower, more mindful, more aware approach using the whole brain. What should be our goals if it's not to win, if it's not to be the one who's right?
I'm going to share something with you. It will surprise you. The goal of a negotiation is to create value for both sides. And I understand we're not talking about politics or negotiation between countries or blackmailing. No. If I want to be a good negotiator, I'm involved in a long-term relationship, right? So if I buy a car, I can be whatever I want to be. But if I'm in sales or I'm in procurement, and I'm going to negotiate with the same people for a long period of time, the real objective of a negotiation, it's a conflict, right? It's a difference of opinion. I want a better deal. I want a better price. That's it. We don't have to go to war. And for our ego, negotiation, it feels like a threat. So we're coming back with our baggage, our emotional reactivity, and we're just not looking forward to that. Mindfulness negotiation is really to set the intent of creating value for both sides. And it starts at the preparation, right? A lot of people prepare, but spend 0 minutes thinking about the other side. What do they want? What do they wish to avoid? You know, what's their objective? What's their priorities? What keeps them awake at night? And it's really about changing the mindset to create, I don't like the win-win situation because people think it's, you know, half and half, but delivering value for both sides.
This is interesting because the way I talk about this in mindful parenting is I do talk about win-win conflict resolution, and we have teachings on lessons on that. But the idea is that really that both parties get their needs met. You know, like what are the underlying needs? Both parties should be able to get their needs met. You know, we don't have to just stop at solution number one, right? Like there are many, many different solutions to getting our underlying needs met.
Yeah.
And what you're talking about is creating value for both sides. I think that's brilliant, right? Like, and parents, of course, need to think about this. And you know, the idea of creating value for both sides is so helpful to think about, like with parenting, because you know, we want to go into, you're saying, think about the other side. What do they need? And there's a couple of instances that brought to mind. And one is, you know, just in general, thinking about parenting, that we have to think about our kids. Like, what are they needing in this situation? What needs need to be met for them? And for me, I recently was approached by the publisher of Raising Good Humans, and they wanted another book. And so I submitted a book proposal, and we negotiated on the like advance and the percentages and things like that. And you're right, like there's all this emotional reactivity that comes up. You know, for me, it was like they offered me X, and, you know, and I'm going to go back and say, I want more than that, you know? And it was hard to do that and scary, you know. It was like it's so interesting, like how much emotion came up, but it was just a simple email. It was so interesting to see how emotional that was. But I love this idea, create value for both sides. And, you know, thinking about the other side is really thinking about like, what do they need, right? What can we, how can, I mean, you don't like the word win-win, but how can we create a win for both sides, at least some sort of win?
Yeah. Well, in reality, we need to slow down, because the example you were just providing, right? You didn't get the advance you wanted. It's not about the money. It's about your value, right? Your self-worth. It's like, I worth more than that. And in negotiation or parenting, it's the same thing. We go in with our own perspective. And in negotiation, we present data, and we're shocked when the other side doesn't see the same perspective as we see, right? Kids don't have our experience. They don't see the world as we see it. That doesn't mean that their needs or their perspective cannot teach us anything, right? So we really need to slow down. We need to be aware that we're going to be emotional when we parent. We need to be aware that we're going to be emotional when we negotiate. That's the first step. And if we are aware of it, now we can plan the conversation differently, right? In negotiation, one of the things that it's important is the difference between what they want and what they need, right? So the kid wants something sugary, right? Dessert or something like that. But what's the real need behind it? Do they want to be rewarded? Do they want to be feel good? You know, there's pleasure. Other things, and that's the toughest part in negotiation, because we're very good to figure out what the other party wants, but we never do the testing. And then we ask questions. We don't even listen to the answer, right? I'm asking you a question and I'm already in my head. I'm not even listening to your question. I'm planning my next phrase. So that means I'm not present. I'm missing some information. And, you know, kids, they want to be independent, right? They want to expand their world. They want to explore, but they want to come back with us, to us, and be loved and be accepted for who they are, right? Mm-hmm. And as parents, sometimes it's challenging because the kids are taking their own boundaries. They want to take control of their own life according to their age.
Autonomy.
Autonomy, right? Exactly. And for us, we want to protect our kid. But everything we're doing our kid, it's fueled from that emotional perspective, you know, reacting emotional. We want to be right. And it's challenging because negotiation and parenting are very, very emotional.
And we have to be clear-headed, is kind of what I'm hearing, right? It's like this, there's all these emotions involved, you know, and as we know, and we really, really want to be able to be clear-headed. We want to have awareness. We want to be able to think clearly.
Yes. And the challenge is maybe not that much. Well, maybe yes, during the pandemic, it's the work, it's the kid, it's the, you know, the daycare, the homework, the you know, stay at home school. There's a lot of challenges that fuel emotion, right? People are tired of COVID. People are worried. People are stressed. And that increases the level of stress, even if we're not seeing it, right? So kids are coming on top of everything else in life. And that's not their fault. Obviously, they're there. But we're living in a space where there's a lot of emotion. Right? You read the news, it's like the vaccine this or against that or in favor of that. There's a lot of emotional that it's fueling our nervous system.
So do you recommend, sorry to interrupt, do you recommend like, you know, reducing exposure to like all the news, like, you know, looking at the stressors in our own life. I mean, because that's true. Like all of those stressors, they add to the nervous system load. And if your nervous system is like, at here, I'm like holding my hand up to my nose, folks, or listening. And, you know, it doesn't take much to like have it go over, you know, and to not then be able to think with your whole brain. So are you recommending that, you know, sort of simplifying as best we can, reducing those inputs?
It's hard to answer, Hunter, because everybody is different, right? So people watch videos on YouTube for what? Because they need a brain dump, they need a break. But is that fueling their recharging their batteries, or is just fueling their awareness that there is emotion around the world? Mm-hmm. I don't have a right answer for that. Everybody has to choose what feels correct for them. But a lot of people are doing things just to numb themselves, right? Mm-hmm. I want to watch whatever, right? A video of cats dancing. I have no interest into that. But people that do this, there's an objective behind it, right? It's maybe to release attention. Or they read the news or reality TV. It's, you know, how many millions people are watching reality TV because it's fun. We're watching other people's drama. But if we're not aware of our own state or emotional state, it's fun to see other people's emotions.
But it could be adding, like, so you're saying, dear listener, like, it'll pay attention. Is this adding to your stress? Is this actually, you know, relaxing you and making you feel more at ease? Or is it doing just the opposite? I mean, that's the same could be said for our like to-do list. Honestly, you know, a lot of parents, a lot of moms get busy, right? They do all the different things. They do. We're never going to run out of stuff to do. It's never all going to be done, sadly, much to my husband's dismay. Like he's never going to tidy the house and it's going to stay exactly the way it is. Yeah. He thinks he wants to start a religion against entropy, which is so hilarious. But anyway, you know, it's like that, but that doing, it could also be like, it could be something that is relieving your stress, or it could be something that you're numbing and you're just pushing it, kicking the can down the road, right? So we have to pay attention to these things.
And what you just said, Hunter, it's all about using mindfulness to understand what's going on? Why am I doing this? What's my need underneath that action? What's the need underneath the to-do list, right? There's a sense of being in control. And being in control, there's a sense of accomplishing something, right? So there's nothing wrong with that. But is it healthy for me? Who said to do this? Where is that coming from? Mom said to tidy your room before you come down for breakfast. Yes. Is that a big deal if my bed is not done? It is. It could be, yeah, because it is what it is. But actually, mindfulness is useful every time we react to somebody else or an event. Is that helping me? Is it not helping me? Why am I snapping at my kid? Because they're not listening to me. There's something deeper than that. There's a trigger, and maybe that has nothing to do with the kid. It has to do with how it was when we were a kid. So the way you describe it, Hunter, it's exactly using mindfulness to understand, am I trying to numb myself? If yes, why? Why is that? Maybe it's too painful, maybe whatever the reason, right? And parenting, it's the same thing. Why am I so strict? Or why am I giving them rules? Or why I'm not open to their point of view, especially when they're getting 10, 11, 12. They have a view on the world that we don't have. But we feel threatened when our kids bring a different perspective. It's like a reflex, right? And they have their own perspective. They have a limited amount of knowledge. They have a limited amount of maturity, but they have a perspective for an 8-year-old, for a 12-year-old, for a 15-year-old, right? That doesn't mean that if they have a right approach that we're wrong. No. But now we can talk to each other, Hunter, because we're not emotional about it. But when we are in the topic, it's challenging.
So step one, I'm hearing from you, Gaetan, is slow down.
Yes.
Right? Build that capacity for awareness. Reduce the stress, slow down, build the capacity for awareness. Try to be understanding what's going on. Ask yourself the questions about why, etc. So maybe this is all the work we're doing kind of before we go into the tricky conversation about cell phones or whatever it is, right? Yeah. That might be a negotiation with our kids. I mean, when my second daughter turns 13, she's expecting that she's going to get a cell phone because her sister did at 13. But like, this is going to be a negotiation because I want to know what are her needs and she needs to know what our needs are. And we need to talk about all those issues.
Yeah. It's interesting. The first two actions you just named, this is my methodology I came up for, the C4U in my book. The first C is just to connect with yourself. So just take a breath. Just shut down the external noise. Just focus. Focus on what's happening inside of us. And most of us, we don't do a good reading of what's happening in our body, tension, feeling, emotion. But this is where it's almost the starting point. What we feel in our body, it's almost telling us our state of mind. My jaw's tightening, my breathing is shallow. It's a source of information, right? And the second step, like you said, is asking, why am I triggered? Why am I doing that? What's the purpose behind it? What am I trying to accomplish, right? If I teach my kids to do something, what's my purpose behind it? Do I want to be right? Do I want to be the person with authority that I don't want any pushback on me? Well, why not? What pushback means to you? And as we peel the onion, as we say, we connect with some deeper element. And only when we reach that level of understanding, we can change our behavior. Because the purpose of being mindful is to understand, why am I reacting the way I react today? And is there another way for me to react?
And what Gaetan's describing here can be mindfulness as a daily practice, right? Where we start to we sit still and we pay attention to our breath, and then our mind gets pulled in a million different directions. We pull it back. But it also can be awareness built in other ways. Like it could be awareness built. And I firmly believe, as dear listeners, you've been around for a while, I'm a firm advocate of a daily mindfulness practice, but it also can be maybe a journaling, right? Asking these questions to yourself, seeing what's come up, or a conversation with a therapist or a good friend, right? To start to understand and have some clarity shed on what's happening, make those unseen things, bring them to the surface so you can actually know what you're dealing with rather than just the surface level reactivity.
Yes, yeah, you're totally right with that. I just want to give you an example. When I was a kid, I could never talk back to mom. Anger was never welcome in my household. So I learned to fear my own anger. Why? Because I was afraid to act upon anger, right? And up to a point where I was working with an executive coach, and she says, "You are an angry person." I'm like, "No, I'm not." And she was like, "You are. Just the way you talk, the way you have a hard time to express yourself, you have a lot of anger." And she said, "What if anger was a sign of information for you? A sign that there's something missing. You're not getting what you want." Mm-hmm. And that was a big moment for me because I never saw anger as a friend because I was so afraid of it, right? Yeah. But now she introduced me the same concept from a totally different mindfulness perspective. What can you learn from anger? And it's okay to be angry. Doesn't mean I'm going to act upon it, but it's okay to be angry. Yeah. And that was very, very freeing for me because I understood that when I was a kid, being angry meant for me that I was not seen. I couldn't express myself. And I transported that belief because a lot of what we do today, it's based on belief. And as a parent, sometimes I was angry at my kid and I didn't understand. And I was blaming them. Oh, they do this to me. No, the kids are not doing anything. It's our own baggage. So that's the power of mindfulness. And as you said earlier, Hunter, working with somebody, a coach, a group, friends that you trust, it's really helpful because sometimes they can see things in us that we have a hard time to see in ourselves.
Now, what if the one we're negotiating with, like our child, whatever age they may be, what if we can see some of the roots or some of the causes or some of the needs in them that they may be in denial about? Like, what happens when that happens in a negotiation?
Well, people don't want to disclose their cards because there's a sense of being vulnerable, right? And if I'm vulnerable, I don't have a lot of power. So there's a lot of links. But the negotiation for me, I want to ask question. So what's your objective, Hunter, today? What's your priority? And if you give me general answer, I can go deeper and say, how can I help you look good? Is there a way I can promote you? Is there a way, or are you afraid to lose face? And when people are in denial, it's an emotion. And if I'm very comfortable in my skin, I can say, probably not to a kid, but to a negotiator, it sounds like you're upset with me. Why is that?
I think we could say that to a kid, though. I'm not sure I could say, why is that? But I could say, sounds like you're upset with me. Yes, totally. I mean, that might be really just acknowledging, saying the elephant in the room there. If they're,
True. And it's all about being mindful in that moment, right? So you want to come from a good place, from a place of compassion. I can say the same in negotiation. Sounds like you're upset. Or am I upsetting you? If you are upset, I'm sorry. That was not my intent. So this is a language of communication. This is a language of building win-win, whatever we want to call that, but creating value for both sides. What I'm telling you, Hunter, if I talk to you like that, even if I say it sounds like you're upset with me, it's very respectful. But it also tells you that I'm here and I see you and I hear you. And sometimes our kids, that's what they want to hear, right? I see you're having a challenge to keep control of your emotion. I see that you're angry at your sister. I see that it's okay. We have a hard time in North America to acknowledge emotion because it feels like, oh, if somebody says you're angry, no, I'm not. I'm going to denial because there's no room, there's no space to explore that, right? And when in negotiation, somebody's in denial, I can challenge that. And I'm just trying to understand. That's what I'm going to share that. I'm trying to understand your perspective so I can give you a proposal that makes sense to you. And very few negotiators have that ability to be in the moment. And for me, it's about going off script and just be there in that moment. And in my language, I call it dancing with the other side. So whatever the rhythm, I'm trying to match the rhythm, not on the bullying side of it, but I'm trying to dance with them. I don't, I'm preparing, I'm fully prepared, but in the moment, I dance with the other side.
And so it's a balance between preparation and then flexibility and really being present. Then you're talking about really mindfully listening. You're observing, the body language, listening to the tone. You're listening for what's being said. You're listening for what's being not said. And you're really, sounds like there's some guessing as to like, okay, so this is kind of what I'm seeing, right?
Or just be curious. I'm just verbalizing.
Not even saying it, maybe just being curious.
It sounds like you're like that. It's not threatening. And it's a good preparation allow you to go off script. What people don't do, they don't prepare and they have a hard time to go off script because now they're all scared, scattered and, nervous. But when somebody comes and say, I don't want to talk to X because I'm afraid they're going to react this way. Now in our mind, we're planning to have a difficult conversation. But ultimately, after a difficult conversation, it's because we make it difficult. We plan to have the other side to yell at us. So we are not looking forward to tell our kids, we're not going to Disney World this summer. We make it a tough conversation because of us. But when we are emotional, we cannot be present. And if we're not present, we're missing a lot of subtleties. We're missing a lot of depth in the conversation because we just take for face value what we see. And that's a challenge.
It's so interesting. And it makes me think about sort of the conversations we have with our kids and how the things you're describing, really being present, mindfully listening, knowing ahead of time what your intentions are and what your needs are, right? Like, and thinking ahead of time about what the other's intentions and needs are. But then really being present. I think a lot of and then the way you describe dancing with the person, I mean, that really, to me, that really resonates with what we talk about in what I call win-win problem solving in mindful parenting, which is this idea of like, when we're in this conversation, our goal is we know our needs. We want to know what our kids' needs are. And then the conversation is a dance. We're meeting them where they are. If we encounter some upsetness and resistance, it's to like say, to see that, to hear that, to understand it, and to kind of go back and forth with it. And it strikes me also that these things can be practiced with things that are not so hard or not so difficult, right? Like we can negotiate positive problems, like where are we going to go on vacation, and what are we going to do this weekend, and different things like that. And those can be ways where we practice it, where it feels not so loaded and heavy emotionally. Do you advocate for that kind of like positive practice?
Yeah, positive practice, mindfulness, absolutely. We talk to our kid in mostly negative terms. Don't do this, or why are you upset? The challenge, and I had no clue when I was a young dad, the way we teach our kids is going to help them or not manage their life when they are adults. So if we never welcome our kids to be emotional, they will have a hard time to express themselves, right? Where do we go for vacation? I want to go this. Okay, great. So now this is your position. Your sister might have a different position. I have a different view. Dad might have a different view. How do we resolve a conflict? And if we do that the right way, maybe our kid will be upset in a moment, but it's a great teaching. Everybody has the right to say what they want to say. And it's a conflict. It's not a bad conflict. It's a fun conflict. So now we go to this trip this year. Next year, we'll go to Disneyland or whatever. I think that perspective is helping our kids to be better prepared to live their life, because life, it's not easy. Life, it's full of deception. Life, it's full of people that are not, wired the same way. We want a promotion because we feel we deserve it. No, it doesn't work like that, right? People don't always see us for the value we bring to the table. Our kids, I think they're not prepared for that, because as parents, we don't have those conversations with them, right?
Yeah, like they need this practice, right? Like it's not bad to negotiate with your kids and ask them about their needs and explain what your needs are and hold boundaries around your needs, because they got to practice this stuff somewhere.
Absolutely. And we have to adapt the conversation to the level of where the kids are, obviously. But if I say to my kid, I don't want you to go to cross the street running, I need to explain why.
Yeah.
It's a safety issue, and I want you to be safe because I love you.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't.
Now, the kids can say, well, it doesn't matter. There's no car on my street. I understand. But one day there might be one car. You might not hear it because it's electric car. You need to develop your muscle of being safe. So your concern, Hunter, is being safe. The kid's concern is, I want to go to the park as soon as possible. I'm with you. That's not negotiable. But that doesn't mean that we have to tell them what to do without explaining, right? So really, mindfulness parenting is about listening to the other person as they were adults and express ourselves like they were adults. And now from there, so this is a conflict. It's okay. You can express yourself. And I'm not going to be upset. Now we need to make a decision. And if we tell our kid, don't do this, and now we come like, well, there are some consequences to your acting, or you don't listen, or you do things that we didn't agree, that's a consequence. And negotiating with our kids doesn't mean that we have to bend backward to give them everything they want. No. But it's to have a conversation like they are little adults. And in their world, they have a different perspective, right? So at a certain age, kids or babies are saying, no, 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 no. And no way you can have them say anything else than no, right? Give grandma a hug because she gave you a Christmas gift. No, I don't want to give her a hug. Okay. But so those are steps in life. They don't want to be told what to do. We have to be able to hear them.
Yeah. Yeah. Listening, even from that young age, and respecting their words makes them more able to listen to you ultimately. I think, Gaetan, this is, you mentioned that your kids are adults, and I'm curious about this has been fascinating. I mean, I think this is so helpful, but I'm curious about your own story. You said you came to this later in your career. What brought you to mindfulness, and how has it shown up or blossomed in your life? I mean, obviously in your negotiation, but.
That's a great question. First of all, when I was at school, my career was based on helping people. So that always been present for me, helping people. I went through healthcare. I wanted to help people. And after that, I'm a hard worker, and I got promotion after promotion after promotion. And honestly, some days I was like, this is never going to end. It's never enough, right? And it's more and more and more money, better suits, car, house, name it.
More responsibility.
More responsibilities. And, I was working all the time, 100 hours per week. And I got one day my dream job, VP Global Sales. My dream job, I thought, because in reality, I hated that job. There was so much politics and behind the scene decision, and I didn't enjoy it. So at one point, I was working with an executive coach, and we really have a lot of conversation about, why do you do that? Well, because you don't understand, it's my image. Yes, okay, what else? And she brought me to a personal growth group with mindfulness. So I've done my own work for 10 years and 5 before I started to write that book. And at the same time I started the work on myself, I became a negotiation consultant. So I observe people every day. I negotiate, I watch, I give feedback. And we do training at a company where I work. But every year, every time I was observing people, it's like, there's missing something here. People are going straight to their limit because they're afraid and they're happy. I'm like, wow, we give so much money, we leave so much money on the table. What's going on? And at one point, after I started to do work on myself, it came up to me and say, we're not dealing with emotion. People are afraid in negotiation. People are stressed. People are nervous. And they're making the wrong decision because they just want to get rid of that negotiation. They just want to move to the next step. And one morning, it came out to me, the idea of writing a book to help people. Not to become better negotiator, that's part of it, yes, but helping them to understand, why do they behave the way they behave today? And I chose negotiation because obviously I kind of bring an expertise in that field. But as I wrote the book, I realized that mindfulness can be applicable to so many things in life, right? Parenting, giving feedback, or deciding to go to the gym, starting a new diet. It's all over the place. And I just came up with that idea of writing a book as my purpose, just helping people.
What does your own mindfulness practice look like?
It varies. It's not, I'm not a monk. I don't be mindful 6 hours a day. I can tell you that when I meditate, I have a better clarity in my head, right? If I don't meditate, I have a tendency to go more in my ego. So mindfulness for me, it's not like I'm sitting in the morning. It's more every day, every minute. When I teach negotiation, if I'm not mindful, maybe I'm pushing too much because I want you to go home with some learning. That's my ego, right? But as a teacher, if I'm offering you stuff, that's it. That's my role. So sometimes my mindfulness practice is just to be aware in that moment. Am I pushing? Do I want to look good? Do I want to look credible? So yes, it's a morning practice. I journal, but it's also every minute. And knowing the trigger, I think that's part of it. Understanding what could be my trigger and why is that? It's every day.
Has all this work you've done improved your relationships with your children who are now older?
Yes and no. I think they always be my kids, right? But now I can have conversation with them about them being in their ego, right? So at one point, my son's girlfriend says, oh, my aunt just died and I have to go to the funeral. But I never saw her. I don't want to go. And I just said, why do you want to go? And she said, well, because my mom wants me to go. And I said, what if you don't go? What would happen? And that was a big shift for her because she felt she has no choice. And I said, okay, so you don't want to go because you don't have a relationship with that aunt? Don't go. Well, you don't understand. Okay, so why don't I understand? My mom is not going to love me anymore. I'm pretty sure she's going to still love you.
Yes, that's really true.
But what I just did, Hunter, is that's the kind of conversation I can have with my kids about their life. Helping them. None of my kids have kids, so eventually that will be another layer. But it's not about me and them. It's about me being in a different relationship with them in terms of not pushing back on what they're doing or judging them or telling them it's wrong or you should do my way. No, it's more inviting them to see, what if you do this? My son was afraid to say no to do overtime on Saturday because he was afraid that his boss will be upset. I said, you don't want to work on weekends because you want to be with your girlfriend. There's nothing wrong with that. And if your boss is not capable of receiving that, I think you might need to change job or, do some search because this is your need. You need to respect yourself. That was not easy for him to say that. And when he said it to his boss, I bet he was shaking inside. But the result was his boss says, okay, I don't necessarily agree with you, but I respect your position. And thank you for sharing that. So now we went from two situations where fear was in control and really helping them to unlock at their own rhythm. What if you express yourself? What's happening? What's the worst case? And that's how mindfulness can help us to unlock the tightness of emotions on our behavior.
Gaetan, thank you so much for taking the time to come and talk to us today at the Mindful Mama podcast. I really appreciate it. It's been such a pleasure. Gaetan's book is Mindful Negotiation with the EGO in negotiation. Where can people find out more about what you're doing?
Well, I have a website. It's called navigatesgroup.com. And my methodology explained, we can look at different perspectives. It's not only on negotiation. And the book is available at any bookstore. And if people want to have a signed, personalized copy, they can order a book through my website as well.
That's so cool. Well, thank you so much. And I wish you a lovely afternoon, Gaetan, in lovely Connecticut.
Yes, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure to be on your show.
Catch new episodes of the Mindful Mama podcast and other free resources, including the Mindful Mom Guide at mindfulmamamentor.com. You can listen to every back catalog episode, including interviews with Dr. Dan Siegel, Janla Van Zandt, Sharon Salzberg, and get meditations, join our private Facebook group, and more. Go to mindfulmamamentor.com now. I'll see you there.